Okay, hello and welcome to the CS10K community event. My name is Michelle Perry and I'm with the American Institutes for Research here in Washington, D.C. We have the pleasure of hosting and supporting the CS10K community. It's great that we have those of you with us for part 2 of this ECS webinar series, Creating an Action Plan for Broadening Participation. For anyone you know who's unable to participate tonight, we'll be recording the webinar and we'll post the recording to the website and promote it via Twitter. Tonight we have Gail Chapman with us. Most of you probably know her, but for those who don't, she's the ECS Director of National Outreach. She's a great supporter of computer science and computer science educators and pretty much knows the ins and outs of ECS. So she'll be walking us through tonight's discussion. It's noted up here on the screen, but we hope you'll call in to the conference number and participate verbally, though you're welcome to just participate via the chat. If you do call in, we just ask that you mute your phone with *6 in order to limit any background noise. But at any time, please comment or ask questions, speak up, or note it in the chat. Without further ado, we'll turn it over to Gail and get started.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you all for spending yet another evening with me. I know there are much more interesting things you could be doing right at the moment, but I think this is really important for us all to discuss always, but especially as we're starting to think about next year and the students that we are going to have in our ECS classrooms. I'm going to echo Michelle's request that you call in if at all possible, especially with a small number of participants. I think it's going to be useful to have some voices rather than dead air, because it's hard, as those of you who have participated in these before know, it's hard to feel comfortable when there's this cricket silence in the room, when all you're doing is staring at a blank screen. So to the extent that that's possible, it would be great. Otherwise, we'll just keep watch of the chat, and I will pause as long as necessary to get you all to type. So I know most of you, we seem to have representation from a variety of places. Philip, welcome. Since you are a new person to this group, and I also know that LA Unified is on spring break this week. I suspect there are other districts that are also on spring break that may have some impact on this attendance. But so to get a sense of where we're going for the evening, I want to start out by talking about how recruitment efforts are going. We had started that conversation last time and sort of ended at that place, everybody thinking about how they were going to recruit, and I'm interested in how that's going so far. Then we'll take a look back at the framework for broadening participation that I highlighted last time, and this will be a review for some, but will also be an opportunity for those of you who weren't here last time to get caught up. And then most of our time will be spent on diving deeper into culturally responsive pedagogy and how that can be enacted in your classrooms, and what features of such pedagogy you feel most comfortable with, where do you feel you might need additional work, and how we might work together to make that happen, and then reflect on a plan of action. So that's me, you know me. So we had, last time I put up a chart that asked you to think about the number of students that you currently have in your classes and how that mirrors or doesn't your overall school enrollment. So it would be good for me to hear more about what that's looked like up to now, which many of you told me already, but then how does that play into recruitment efforts for the upcoming year? So in particular, what successes have you had to date, and what have been some of the challenges, and what more do you think you can do or need to do in order to get the level of diversity in your classes that you'd like to have next year? So I'm going to pause for a moment or two and let you type away. So you'll know I have not muted myself and I have not left the room. I just am going to wait an appropriate amount of time. So, and I'm good at that.
Hi, this is Elaine. I have limited typing ability because I'm on a tablet.
Well, that's good. I'm glad because that means I can hear your voice.
Okay. This is just the second year I've been in Pembroke, so I think I've had successes in that the girls who are in my class are doing great and like to be there, and they want to take CSP next year. So the girls that are there are happy to be there and are finding some leadership roles in the classes and hopefully attracting other girls. We had some posters put up and around saying we need girls in robotics, like just plain and simple. We need girls in computer science. We need girls in robotics. And so the girls who are there are doing happy and great. And Technovation last year was one team, and this year is two. So for me, Technovation does really a good job at bringing girls in. And I don't have a whole lot of diversity other than worrying about the girls at the school that I'm in.
All right. Well, so we'll need to think more about how that all plays into this conversation. Nicole indicates that more girls are seeing that they fit or belong in CS due to more awareness. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Nicole, and how it might be impacting recruitment? Philip, can you hear me? Okay, good. This is the silence that occurs in one of these webinars when we're trying to get people to participate. So just hang on. Janet, how many years have you been running ECS now? Three. Okay, so I combine that with what Vic just said about fewer electives being offered and the opportunity for girls to be enrolled in ECS more by default. Some of this has to do with the reputation that the course begins to have, and we'll talk more about that when we go back to that broadening participation slide. But it's that once you get them in there and girls are having success, then we have an opportunity to build a reputation that feeds on itself. So hopefully we're beginning to see that trend start to really take hold. And yes, as Nicole mentioned, working at the state level to get CS to count for graduation credit makes a huge difference, right? So all of these things combined together create a reputation that hopefully once they get into class, they are also maintaining. Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is Elaine. I just wanted to respond to something Janet said about possibly just losing students who keep them from being comfortable in group work environments.
Right.
In that way, I do have some successes also in addition to trying to encourage girls, although I don't have many at the moment, maybe 10 or 20%, 15%. But the students who do struggle with group work, that typically struggle with group work, are finding success. They're not dropping out of the class. They're finding a comfortable environment. And I think I try really hard to keep the ones with IEPs and uncomfortable with group work in the class.
That's great. And that was one of the comments I wanted to really highlight. Janet's comment was one I really wanted to highlight because I want to come back to that and what you just said, Elaine, a little bit later and make that part of the focus of discussion on, what's happening with students once they're in the class, which we are going to move on to now, and we can come back to this whole recruitment piece in a few minutes if we have time and want to. But to summarize what I'm seeing so far is that there's progress. Those of you who have been teaching teaching ECS for more than a year are making progress on a variety of fronts in helping the school environment, the community and district environment understand more about why they might want to take ECS. And then once students are getting in there, they're starting to have a positive impact on the culture for the rest of the school. So that's all good news. So this is, we've already moved into this conversation, I think, with the recent discussion about those students who are already uncomfortable with group work environments and how we might work about them. But let's take a step back and think about the students in your class. Some of you work with more diverse populations than others, and we focused on girls, and maybe for your environments, that's the primary underrepresented demographic. But think about your classes broadly, and are all students participating equally? If so, why do you think that is? And if not, why not?
This is Nicole. I thought I would call in, join. This is Nicole. I thought I'd call in so I could join the conversation so it's not so quiet. I think that at my school that I previously worked at, where we had a lot of diversity, we didn't have a lot of kids in our classes who I really wanted in there because they had to take remedial classes, or they had to take other specific classes for graduation. And so I really tried to work with counselors to help them see the value of taking exploring computer science as the electives that they got, so that it could help them be more well-rounded students, because we covered so many things in exploring computer science, and unless the counselors knew all the fun things that we were doing and how we connected a lot of the skills they needed, they would kind of push my class off. So it took a lot of convincing the counselors what we did in class, why it was important, and how the kids would benefit in all their classes to make the counselors see why they should be there. And it was a lot of hard work, but I think after a couple of years, we got the students who really didn't see in our classes to show up in our ECS classes. And it made them happy to be successful and have those skills they needed to go out and do well in their other classes.
Thanks, Nicole. And Vic, ninth grade students, yes. So ninth graders are different than seniors, for sure. And as Janet is pointing out, there are those with less experience in things related to computers. So how can we, all right, I'm moving too far ahead. Let's talk about why we think that's happening then, right? Why is that difference in their background and skills influencing their participation in the classroom?
Well, ideally, they're learning from one another to upgrade their tech skills. But what I find more often is that it takes one-on-one help from me to a pointed student to bring them kind of up to speed while other students are working and I'm leaving them alone kind of, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. I tend to focus on one-on-one time to bring up their tech skills, and that seems to make a big difference, even though ideally maybe they're getting them from the group, but usually it's me really trying to sit with them for some extended periods of time.
And when you do that, do you find that there is a change in the way they participate in the future?
Yeah, sometimes, most of the time, I do. At least I finally bought into switching around the groups a lot. Sometimes we have defined groups, like just because of materials, and we're into robotics, so those groups tend to be a little bit more defined. But then we come out of those groups and switch them up a lot, and that's helped a lot too, because they know, oh, I'm only going to be in this group for, a day or a half an hour. So they do get a little more comfortable, and then I really try to pull on skills that I know I've introduced to students who have needed it. So
okay.
It's kind of a lot of work of juggling, but I try. It does make a difference.
Yeah. So I think I'm seeing in here in the comments the reality that folks are starting to find some strategies that can help deal with discussion question number 1. And so let me remind you of this graphic that I showed the last time, and the fact that our work is far from over. Now, we have this CS for All effort, and before most of you were on the phone tonight, I made a comment about this having been a day, and it has. And one of the challenges is there is all of a sudden this big push for CS for All, and many states have decided that this is now something they want to jump on when they showed no interest 6 months ago, but they want to do it yesterday without any real thought of a plan. And history shows that it's not just in computer science, but in most things in education. Without a plan, you're largely doomed for it to not succeed. And so I think one of the really positive parts of what has happened with the Exploring Computer Science and CS Principles projects in their history is their slow but steady, gradual scale-up. And it's very tempting to get caught up in the insanity and say, oh, well, let's scale a little faster and move a little faster. When you sit back and think about it for a little while, you realize that, no, actually the way that things have been happening is exactly why these 2 courses have been moving forward, because we have the availability of those courses now, but most of the time when we have started programs, there have been teacher champions. Those are those people on the phone. Administrators have been supportive, even if it's just been one school in the district. There's been some level of community support. Sometimes that comes afterwards, but, and then some sort of partnership, whether it be with a university or a state institution or a business. There's something that has helped get the courses into schools in the beginning, right? So there might be 1 class or 2 classes, but something that gets it on the master schedule. The many stealth ways that we've managed to get it on the books, calling it computer literacy, putting it in a CTE course that was, horrible, but we managed to change the curriculum. Whatever the method, we got the courses into the schools, and then we started being able to attract and enroll students. And so the previous conversation we had about, the fact that you're starting to get more girls or you're starting to get more diverse classrooms is a direct correlation to the reputation the course is building. So it becomes increasingly important that whatever happens in the class is positive, because the reputation can become the thing that derails us. And all you have to do is look at the history of AP CSA to know that reputation can be positive or it can be negative. It can reinforce stereotypes or it can open doors. And we would like to open doors and have students be successful and have them learn some computer science while they're at it. So that brings us to the crux of the matter, which is what ECS PD is all about, really, which is effectively teaching students. And in, the curriculum in and of itself is not engaging, right? Curriculum is nothing more than a bunch of words on a piece of paper. It's teachers that make it culturally relevant and inclusive. So how are we as teachers going to make that happen? That's our challenge, right? That's the thing that will allow us to have all students participating equally. And as was noted, that's kind of what Unit 1 is supposed to be all about. But that's a challenge, and you bring your students in with all these different issues and backgrounds. What are the strategies that we can use to make that consistently work year after year, class after class? So I'm going to pause for a minute, read the comments that have been flying in, and ask you to think about the next question, which is what particular strengths do you bring to teaching culturally diverse students? And that should be do, not to, but Janet, I have a question, and while you're typing, you might just add this. So when you say administrators they're used to measuring it with standardized data, what kinds of things are they doing now? Okay, right. So if you're a school that is an AP school where students are taking courses because of what they can do for them when they get to college, et cetera, that you have a different set of criteria you have to use to think about. In general, AP is not necessarily the best first experience for all students, and I think that's the challenge when we move to any course that we want to have all students engage in. How are we going to make sure that they're successful without lowering expectations? And I think that's one of the very frustrating things for me has been the misconception people have that if you're not taking an APCS course, you're not getting CS content at all. And there's no other academic discipline at the high school level where people think that. So it always baffles me that we just don't assume that people come full-blown into AP Calculus. Students have years and years and years of math before they get there, and we don't expect them to all of a sudden take calculus. But somehow in computer science, we do. And of course, I totally agree with Nicole's last comment. And I think this is, this is a struggle that if teachers love their content area, sometimes they are great at teaching it also, and sometimes they're so interested in the content that they lose sight of the fact that there's kids in the room. So Janet, do you need test scores to be able to show that? Yes, Janet, I think that's right. I think you need to have students be able to talk about what they're doing, to be able to show the work that they've done, to be excited about it. And then I think we also need to have ways of getting that across to administrators so that they see the connection with the student work and the fact that they're actually learning something. And Janet, sometimes it doesn't take much in terms of a demo lesson to get the point across. You can certainly use actual activities from ECS, but you could also use things that are relevant to adults to make the point. And one of the examples that I've used a few times is a chart that I saw 4 or 5 years ago now that was a chart of CEO salaries versus worker salaries from a variety of countries. And it turns out that it was posted on Facebook, but you couldn't find a reference anywhere to where the data came from. And so, to just post that up as a slide and say, oh, do a journal, what's your first thought on this? And watch what people's reactions are. And then ask them what questions they might have about this data. And from the initial reaction to the questions that they start to formulate, just that leap is enough to get the conversation going to say, this is what we do with students in the classroom, right? We force them to engage in conversations that are about being a citizen in this country and problem solving and being able to do a variety of different kinds of computing per se or programming. It's as Vic notes here, it's about project management, human resources, whatever you're doing, these concepts are important. And then you can get into the uniqueness of computer science, but you got to get them awake before you can not to the exclusion of anything else, or the programming to the exclusion of anything else. And really, there's just such a broad thing, but of course, I'm preaching to the choir here. So to go back to the conversation about students that aren't engaged and the reasons that they're not engaged, both the research and practical implementations in successful classrooms, computer science, but shows that these 6 culturally relevant pedagogy are critical to ensuring that all students participate and are successful. So 2 things I'd like you to think about. What do these particular features look like in an ECS classroom? So examples, right? Examples of lessons that you've done that showcase these things. And in which places do you feel like you're the most skilled, or where you might need more growth?
I think one thing that has helped me engage students is not to assume what they know. Like in the robotics, you start using the motors and the sensors. I had them make posters about the motors and sensors because they can think they know, but they really don't. So once they've made a poster, and then they can all refer to each other's posters, and now we're kind of in a safe place in poster land, then they can come back out of the posters, and now so using posters and have them make posters as a grade has helped me a lot.
So I hear you saying that sometimes students come across as thinking they know more than they really do about a particular thing when they come in. Okay.
Right, and that can scare the girls away. Now boys are talking about motors, and just because they're a boy, they know about the motors, but they really don't.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that particular strategy and notion of not assuming, not making assumptions people know or don't know, even based on what they say they know or don't know, is the strategy that can be useful starting on day 1 of ECS. Yeah, so Janet, you want to elaborate on that a little bit? I think I know exactly what you mean, but I don't want to presume too much. And yes, Nicole, can you provide a specific example that jumps out at you?
Sure. In Unit 2, in Unit 2, when they have to come up with a problem that they have to solve or a thing about solving in their local community or school, I think really helps kids start to think, oh my gosh, I'm going to solve this big, huge thing. I see something going on in my community. And then you have to do the problem-solving process, and they're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of steps. And a lot of my students, when they would do that project in Unit 2, they kind of get discouraged because they saw that there was so much to do, and they were only students in an ECS class. And so I try to help them break down different problems they could solve, maybe in the school or in our class or other things that were attainable, so that they could see one successful problem being solved, whether it was in the class or school. And then when I would say, hey, well, let's look out in the community. What can you do in the community? And they're like, well, we could do X, Y, Z. I'm thinking of, these are the things it takes. Here's where I can make an impact. That's when I reach out to in the community that does have an impact. A lot of the times I'd help students try to make networks or connections with people at the school or in the community to find out both sides of the situation, especially if it was something at school like they didn't like the dress code. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about the dress code with your group, figure out the pros and the cons of the dress code, think of why they might have the code, think of what would you change if you could change the dress code, and go out and do a survey among students, see why they would want it changed and how they would change it. And it was interesting to see what they would come back with. A lot of times kids were like, yeah, we put it the way it is, because so many people had different stories. And a lot of them decided that, yeah, a lot of teachers wanted uniforms because it would make life easier. We wouldn't have to worry about students dressing a certain way or not participating in class as well as we'd like. They were worried about fashion or their neighbors and what they were doing or wearing. But then they thought, well, it's not too bad. So we don't have to wear uniforms, or at least we get choice. And so they would come away a lot of times with feeling okay about the way things were in class. I know one time I had the students come up with a project, and they decided that they wanted to talk about the school bathrooms, and that the bathrooms weren't ever clean. So when it came down to it, they really thought it was a custodian's fault. And then when we talked about, well, it's clean in the morning when you come, and when the custodians leave at night, it's clean. Who's there during the day? It came down to kids taking on responsibility that, wow, it's us. During the day, it's us. It's not the custodian's job to come in after each class period or at lunch to clean up after us. If we take the initiative to tell our peers when they're in there to be clean, it might make a different story. And so it was interesting to see how the kids came up with that, going, oh, I can change myself and I can try to change those around me, but we need to be aware of whose job it is to take care of things. So I think that helps. And then in units, almost in each unit, there's something. Even when we talk about robots, well, why do we have robots? How can robots be useful in our society? If we're afraid that robots are going to take over so many people's jobs, well, why would that happen? If we're going to think about teaching, a lot of teachers were afraid when we started doing online classes that we wouldn't need teachers anymore. Well, a lot of students aren't successful in online classes because they don't have that human interaction with teachers. They don't have someone who's showing that they care. They don't have someone checking in on them. They don't have interaction with other peers, people who are noticing things about them. Those little things that you notice as they walk in the door and you shake their hand, or you walk in the door and you say hi, or when you're walking around the class and oh, you got a haircut, nice haircut, or no, new shoes, I like the shoes. They don't feel that need, that they're needed or that they're wanted. And so just talking about making real-world connections with it. And with the data unit right now with the Apple iPhone and the FBI and them wanting to tell Apple they have to unlock it. Well, what is it about data that Apple's afraid of? but just bringing in local things or things going on nationwide that relates to your topics as like 5-minute starters. Have them write it down in their journal and then pass their journal to the neighbor next to them. They can see what their peers are thinking and come up with some kind of an idea then to bring to the class as a whole if they were to be called on.
Yeah, so what I just heard you say for, in your comments touched on multiple bullets of the relevant pedagogy, right? It's making it relevant, using their out-of-school knowledge, connecting classroom learning to social and political context, caring and respectful relationships, and high expectations, right? So Elaine put a comment in here about wanting her students at all levels to be successful. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges in teaching when we're saying we want to do it for all. What is the amount of stuff that we want students to absolutely know and be able to do when they leave our class to be considered, successful, quote unquote, and making sure that all students can reach that level at whatever pace they need to get there, and at the same time providing that stretch for students who, for whatever reason, maybe they aren't the ones who came in with the strongest skills. I mean, how many of you have had students who walked into your class that seemingly were not going to be successful at all and then took off and became the person that walked away having learned the most and become that person that you look back on and say, wow, that was teaching too?
Hi, I think hi. I think some of I think I have a lot of those students. I have a lot of what we call low-level math students, and their success in the class, having success in this class, where sometimes they're not finding success anywhere else. And they're like, I love this class, and then they want to move on in computer science. What else can I do? So that's as much of a success as kids who are, really more getting into the technical details and going to take CSP and AP computer science.
Right. It's measuring success in different ways, right? I mean,
yeah.
Some people are more interested for whatever reason, and therefore, successful. So I think finding ways to measure success that are not Did those of you who were having trouble with the audio, could you hear us that time? Okay, I'm going to hope that you can still hear me and open it up to any questions that anybody related to our general conversation so far this evening, and we'll start to move towards wrapping up.
Gail, are you still there?
I am. I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. It sounded like the line went dead for a minute.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. So, bye, Elaine. And, yeah. So this seems like, since Elaine's leaving and folks are starting to have trouble hearing for whatever reason, it seems like a good time yeah, so apparently not. Okay.
Mm-mm. Interesting. I wonder if there's a glitch, lag in the
Yeah, apparently.
audio.
Very strange. Very strange. So, reminder, I'll type end right and talk and see if that works. Reflect. Oops. Reflect, plan, observe, act, repeat. Okay, again, I'm talking and typing because I'm not sure who's hearing this. But for next time, I'd like you to leave with these two final reflections. Okay, some particular areas that you'd like to focus on with regards to your own teaching practice for next year, who might support you in this, and we'll talk about that'll be one of the topics of conversation for the next webinar there will be others.
Gail, if you can still hear me, I just lost connection, and I'm entering the room back again, but I'm not sure if that's affected anyone else at the moment.
Okay. Well, it's time to leave anyway, so I think I will just slide these next steps slides along and reminder of the next webinars. And thank you all for joining. It was a small group, but you all were great. And I hope you can talk others into participating.
Well, thank you, and thank everyone else who joined us tonight. I apologize again for